Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk about the things that I don't necessarily agree with when it comes to these hypergamous coaches and also our woman financial advisor. I will refer to her as financial advisor as I believe in moving in silence. I am an OG follower of hers though. First things first, I want to talk about making sure that you get your education and that status does matter when it comes to hypergamy dating. Let me explain. Those men, they're not necessarily looking at your status and your accomplishments and your high earnings for them to take advantage of you or for you to help them with bills, but they are in environments where higher earning women are, and it helps to also be pretty, of course, but those men are dating within their circles, and if you cannot afford to be in those circles, it is going to be harder for you. The other thing is that a lot of these men, they will date pretty women that are low earning, but they typically marry women that are well educated, have status, whether they were born in that environment, and have connections. You have to remember that high earning men are men who like to compete in the world. So they're not top earners for anything. They're men who constantly like to compete, and they like women who will continue their legacy and raise their kids to be smart and also well off or higher earning. And that is why you'll get people who will move in certain environments and keep this whole thing going so that they can network with higher earning people and stay amongst those higher earning people. And that is why you will have a lot of people also sometimes arrange marriages or introduce their daughters to certain men so that they can find the best providers. So that's just a tidbit. I'm going to share some stories about things that I followed and how this did not, play out the way that I thought it did. But basically, the higher up you are, the better your options are. It puts you in those neighborhoods with those men. It, allows you to rub elbows with those men every single day at work. And I know people may be saying, well, who are you, on this YouTube video, as I have just started this channel. I want to give you a little bit of background about who I am. I am an engineer who worked in the construction industry with a lot of men. I worked in a firm with over 200 engineers, and there were only 4 women. And so I got to observe a lot. I got to observe higher earning men from all different ages, all different walks of life, young, old, all sorts of things. And I can tell you that most of their women, kind of ran within the same circles, whether it been college or, them going to the same Ivy League school, or it was them being in the same social circles.
I'm going to share some observations with you today, ladies, about wealthy single men, because kind of fall into a couple different categories when they're looking for ladies and the type of ladies they're looking for. So let's talk about it. In my experience as a matchmaker, been doing this 15 years, working with some of the most eligible men in the world, I find that it's the guys who still are looking to get married and start a family. If they are also very accomplished, they want a woman very accomplished. They want their kids to be smart, but they want to have a partner so they can truly be a power couple, to have children, to grow this great family and create the next generation. All right. But I find something a little different happens when they've been divorced. So let's talk about it. I find that those men who have already had their kids, had their family, and maybe now they're just in the second chapter of their life, they care less about accomplishments. Now, a lot of men, most of the men that I deal with, they definitely want a woman who has some sort of an interesting life, okay? And a fully developed life of her own. But they care less about how, that she's a powerhouse, less that you've gone to an Ivy League school, and they're more concerned about how free you are and available to travel with them. How can you prioritize a relationship, and how can you kind of and go places and and be with them around their schedule. So I find that in the first phase of a guy's life, when he's starting a family and he's extremely wealthy and successful, maybe comes from money, then the partner he chooses out of the gate to have these kids with matters. Her accomplishments, her education, her background, a lot of times, all of that matters. But if he's in the second phase of his life, even if he wants more kids, even if he is in a place where he wants a substantial partner, and of course all of my guys do, they're more concerned certainly with a woman and her schedule and her availability in order to travel and spend time with him. All right? Hope it helps.
So I remember years ago, I went on a date with this guy who was a millionaire. And when I met him, he had 20 million. That was his net worth. I verified it and everything. And he handed me a black card. And I remember he kept talking about, I'll take care of you. I'll do for you. I'll do this and I'll do that. And we ended up going out on a date. And he was talking about taking me to the Kentucky Derby and just all of these events. And he was talking about how I would fit in so well with his circle and how classy I was and how I exuded elegance. And when he got to the question of, so what do you do? I remember telling him that I worked at the local hospital at the help desk. And his whole energy changed. And I remember he was like, don't you want more out of life? And keep in mind, I'm really an engineer, so I had lied based on what the femininity coaches are saying. And he was like, what did you major in? And I found it interesting that he just automatically knew I went to college based off of just, the way I carried myself. And, I think I exuded abundance and success, and I couldn't even really hide it because they recognize they tribe too. Like, you will stick out like a sore thumb amongst them if you really, can relate. But anyway, I had to completely keep my lie going. So I had to tell him my major was something where it was hard to get a job and like all this different stuff. And he was like, well, I'm going to talk to my golf buddies and see if I can get you a better job, And after that, his whole energy just completely changed because I no longer was able to fit into his circle. And the messed up part was that he actually started as an engineer and he switched over into something that just made him a whole lot of money. And I was just like, dang. And so I really missed out on this $20 million man. But I learned my lesson. And the next time, maybe like 3 or 4 weeks later, I went on a date with another millionaire. And this guy, he was younger. He was in his 40s. And when we got to the table and we started talking, he was like, so what do you do for a living? And I was like, I'm an engineer. And he was like, really? He was like, I knew it was a reason that I met you. He was like, and I don't mean to keep saying like, but he said, if we were to get married, he said, you don't have to work if you don't want to. He said, or I could open you a business, or you could help me with my business, or you could just sit back at home, or you could travel with me and just enjoy. He was like, I go to a lot of different little conventions and seminars and conferences about investors investing into my businesses and different things like that. And then he proceeded to tell me, he was like, I'm opening a restaurant and this will be my first restaurant. He said, normally I have businesses in 2 other industries. And he said, what do I need to do to get, the drawings approved, or what's the process to get that done in a timely manner? And I was able to tell him, based on my connections and key people in the city and all of those different things. And he was just, he was like, I knew it was the reason that we met or whatever. And that was that.
So I get asked this question. Is there a secret to dating the high caliber man? Okay. But there's a big difference in dating the high caliber man versus being the one they marry. Okay. So let's talk about that. The secret is in the difference between these two women. All right. So a woman, high caliber, super successful, affluent men, which I think high caliber is one thing, super successful and affluent is another. A high caliber man could just be a man of ambition and qualities and substance. that could be a high caliber man. It could be a high quality man. But if you're talking about affluent, the kind of guys I work with, billionaires, multimillionaires, and that kind of thing, either way, what it comes down to, these same two categories of men will date one type of woman and marry the other. All right. So let's get into it. So the type of woman they may just date is going to probably show up and just look gorgeous. She's going to look the part, and he will enjoy spending time with her. He will enjoy having sex with her. He will enjoy showing her off to people. But a woman that he marries is going to have the right look that he's proud to show off to everybody, but they're also going to have more than that. They're not going to be somebody who's just so proud of their Gucci bag or their Prada shoes, and they're not going to be the woman that has nothing going for themselves or just can't talk about anything. These are the women that just end up dating these guys and accepting the lavish gifts, but almost never do not end up becoming the wife. The wife has to bring more than just this to the table. She has to be willing to be a partner in the relationship. She has to care about what he wants. She cares about his happiness. She brings her own life experience, her own passions, her own interests to the table. So if there's any secret to capturing a high caliber billionaire, celebrity, millionaire, multimillionaire, you got to bring more to the table than just being pretty. You have to have your own opinions. You have to also be available. That's part of the deal. When they can get together, they will be patient if you're busy a little bit. But if you're always busy and too hard to get a hold of or get together with, they are on to the next. All right. You have to have passions and interest, but a well-balanced life. And yes, some of you will say, well, that's not fair. Life isn't fair, my friend. I didn't make it up. I didn't make up the rules. But if you want the scoop, you want the secrets, there they are. All right. There's a lot more. You can click the link below. You can do a call with me, whatever you want. I'm here to.
The other thing about this is that if you tell people what you do, then it weeds out the men who will either step up to the plate or step to the side. And let me explain. If you tell a Dusty that you are successful and you're also very beautiful, a lot of times they will probably come with the humbling tactics, but they'll move along because they know that you're accustomed to a nice lifestyle. And then the other thing is it weeds out those men who want to financially abuse women who may be higher earning, but purposely want women who don't have anything so that they can still manipulate. And also, when you tell men, you are successful, you get better gifts because it's like, hey, she's accustomed to nice things and they have to step up to the plate a little bit more. You're not easily impressed because you've been living such a good life. So, lawyers and doctors and, software engineers, it's kind of like, oh, she's already living a good life. She's accustomed to good things or nice things. So I have to really come with my A game. You get what I'm saying? And I know someone will come on here and say, well, I'm not doing anything major and I'm still getting all of this or whatever. And so this doesn't matter. I'm just merely telling you how to increase your chances. And like I said, and like she said in the video, a lot of times these men, they'll buy you nice things, but we're talking about let's seal the deal. The third thing that I don't agree with is I don't think that women should be asking for money on the first date or very early on. A lot of these men will show that they're providers and they will show, that they solve problems and stuff like that. Men who genuinely care and are going to provide, they'll kind of show themselves. Just like I said, on one of those dates, the guy straight up told me, he said, he said, if we get married, you don't have to work if you don't want to. So those men, they'll show that. They won't be asking you to go on Dutch dates or, trying to take you on cheap dates and all of those things. Men who truly provide and see the value in women or see the value in that woman, he will, go above and beyond and do something nice, because he will understand that this exhibits, I need to show her, this is what it would be like if I dated her. Also, dated her more long term. Also, every time I see those balloon shows, which I think are low value anyway, I cringe when I see those women say, "So how much do you make?" It's just so tacky, and it's just not classy. There are ways to, figure out what people make and, kind of what their status is without you having to straight out ask them about their income. And I also don't think that women should walk up to men or talk to men and ask them, "Do you have a provider mindset?" It's almost giving like the same way some men will say, "Are you a traditional woman?" Or they'll ask, "Do you submit?" Or they'll ask if you're very feminine and stuff like this. They'll say certain things because it kind of symbolizes that they're not used to, you know, women that treat them a certain way, or women that carry themselves a certain way. It's sort of the same thing. It's kind of representing that you're not used to men providing. So act spoiled, act like, this is normal, and this is how you're treated, and pretty soon that's what it will be. Like I said, certain men, after a while you exude certain things without you really even having to say it. But I can't stand when like women do that. And I'm not saying don't ask for things, but I just don't think you should do it early on. And also, a lot of these men, especially like really high earning or whatever, they're used to people like trying to ask them for money and treating them like an ATM and talking about certain things and this and that. He is there to kind of enjoy your time, and you need to stand out and not be like everyone else talking about his money. My next thing that I don't necessarily agree with is marrying men that are super duper old. I think it's cool to marry older men, just not super duper old, like somebody who's like in their retirement age. And if you're in your 20s and 30s, I would not recommend it personally, because it's kind of like you're going to be a hospice wife while you're still somewhat enjoying your youth. And I seen it when I was a CNA in college. Unless you have like an Anna Nicole situation where it's around the clock nurses and you really are not having to do anything, I just wouldn't do it. And even that, those services like around the clock are even expensive for six-figure men. Like I personally wouldn't do it, even though you could get his pension plan and social security and just all these different things. It wouldn't be worth it unless it's just a uber duper amount of money.
It's a group of men. When they get to 50, they start falling apart. I found out just by doing this podcast. There's this term called hospice wife. So,
Never heard of it.
right. So I'll give you how it is. Hospice wife. So a hospice wife, basically a man above 50, marries a woman. Finally, he's been playing the field for 50 years, and now he's ready to get married. His body is falling apart. He's got hypertension. He's got diabetes, heart issues, the whole nine. And now he's ready to get married and settle down. So now he marries a woman maybe 10 years younger, or maybe in the same age group. And now he's marrying her, but only for him to have someone to take care of him in his later years.
I had this happen to a friend of mine, and she's actually a doctor. And before they could even make it down the aisle, this old man died. So I'm not even sure if she really even benefited from it. But plus, like, he didn't even have any money. So I'm like, girl, what did you do? But like the basics that a wife would have gotten, she wasn't a wife yet. My next thing, the girls went in a frenzy over this one, and it's that, you know, I guess provider men or hypergamous men don't necessarily like curly hair or braids. Um, it depends on your target. I will say this: when I was working in my office, I know some days I would come in with my curly hair, and the white men, they would go crazy over my curly hair. They liked curly hair, and I'm not really an afro person though. But my hair is 4A, 4B. I'm dark skinned, and the guys would be like, "Oh, your hair looks nice like that." I remember like I would take out my weave and I would end up wearing my real hair some days, and they'd be like, "Oh, your hair looks nice like that." And then I remember one day I had like some Allen Iverson braids, but it was like four big braids, and the small ones tied into the four big ones. And this boy who sat behind me, he was like, "Why did you take your hair down?" He was like, "I like those cornrows you had in." And I'm saying to myself, because he was an Italian guy, I'm like, "You know what they are?" Like, I'm thinking he's just going to say braids. He's like, "I liked your cornrows." And I'm like, "What?" But I say this to say, I think it depends on who the man is. And like in my office, it was this one guy. He was crazy about women who look like Anita Baker. He liked dark-skinned women with pixie cuts. But I remember I would come to work with my long hair or my long weave, and it would be pressed out. He'd be like, "Ooh, where you going? Where you going today?" So I think, our financial advisor, what she really probably meant by that is long straight hair is kind of universal for all guys. But really, it's gonna depend on the target, and I think y'all know what I mean by that. Especially, if you're dating interracially as a black girl, then hair and thick, thick or curly hair or whatever looks good. And then one time I was at Home Depot and I had this loose curly hair, not really, really tight curls, but I was in Home Depot minding my business. I wasn't even looking for nobody, but I just moved into my new home. So I'm like back and forth painting and stuff like that. And I remember this Hispanic man, he was really walking up to me to hand out his card. He was like, "I paint homes." And he was like, "Oh, hey, nice to meet you," and all this stuff. And I just thought it's so funny to see based on the change of hairstyles, how different men act. But, I think this is kind of a given. The girls have been in a frenzy over this one, saying that, I do just fine with my curly hair. Now, one thing I have not seen is, men really being all in love with dreads. Most of the men who I know that, are considered hypergamous or men of means and stuff like that, I haven't really seen them go crazy over dreads. But I'm not saying it don't exist. And I think too, because I don't wear dreads, so I don't really know, because I haven't wore dreads and seen how people reacted to them. So that's kind of like my fifth thing. And the sixth thing is excluding men who come from single parent households. For the most part, most of the men who come from two parent households, they will be providers, but of course there are some toxic marriages where people are still married and they're just there and they hate each other, and he's been abusive, or the men are controlling, or the wives baby the husbands and things of that sort. So I can't fully agree. I remember I had this friend and she got this guy, which she should have stayed away from him. But I remember, and she's a pick me, build him up, all that. And I remember she got this guy that she met, and she basically had to clean him up. Like, he didn't have a car. He was staying with his dad. He was staying with his dad and his stepmom. And she was like, I let him move in with me, and I wrote his resume up, and I helped him get a job, and then I applied for him another job. Like, she did everything for him. And she was like, "Oh, I sent him on his way. I had to drive him to work." And it was just a mess. And then she turned around and got pregnant with him and got stuck with him. And then she started getting mad with him. And she was like, "I'm mad with him." She literally had to pack him up like a child, put him in the car, and take him back to his dad and his stepmom. And she would be venting to his stepmom, and she was like, his stepmom told me that his dad acts like a big baby and can't do anything for himself. And the reason why he was married to his stepmom is because his actual biological mother died. And so the boy's dad had hurried up and got married really quick because he didn't know how to do anything without the wife. So I say this to say, like, Buddy was still a big child, even though he came from a 2-parent household. He was just like his freaking daddy. And I know some guys when I was in college that were amazing, had amazing provider mindsets, because sometimes single mothers, they will raise their sons to be the man that they never had, or, just because they come from a single parent household, some of their fathers are still heavily in their lives and provide well. I remember this one man who was in my office. He had divorced his wife, and he was like, it's still my duty to provide, even though I'm not in that household. And, he was still telling me a lot of the different things that he was doing for his kids, even though he was not in their house anymore. He was like, it's my job to provide as a man. So that's why I say that. But those are all the things that I don't necessarily agree with. I appreciate you guys watching this long video. Please rate, comment, and subscribe to my channel. I will be coming out with a lot more videos. Thank you. Bye-bye.